Welcome to the Salem Chamber podcast. I'm Tom Hoffert, CEO of the Salem Chamber, and we're pleased to have you listening. Let's jump right in. Today I'm joined by Dr. Kristine Medyanik, owner of Shattered Glass Leadership and full-time professor at Corban University. Dr. K, great to have you here today.
Yeah, it's an honor. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk. It's a special opportunity when we get to talk leadership. And although we will talk about your business quite a bit, I'd like to start by a foundation of understanding for this conversation. When you hear the word leadership, what does it mean to you as a professional whose entire career is around building future leaders?
Yeah, I really think it's really important to focus on leadership as an avenue of impact and influence and not a titled position. I think on a day-to-day basis, we are influencing our families, we're influencing the community work we do, we are impacting the people around us in big ways and little ways. And it's really important that we not put things on such a pedestal that we find ourselves in a position of going, oh, I'm not a leader, that doesn't apply to me. Because you're a human, so it does sort of apply to you.
When you look at this chosen field of leadership development, of consulting, of guiding people to better outcomes, how did this start for you? And maybe if you could, take me back to a little bit of your history growing up. I know you served our country, and I appreciate that. Our veterans are just incredible people who are very selfless. I come from a family of veterans. Talk to me a little bit about your history and how you wound up in this space where now your entire career is built around empowering others and bringing people up.
Yeah, well, I could go way back to the beginning. And I think from the time I was like 2 years old, my parents would go, she's going to be a great leader someday if we survive this.
Where would your parents have been saying that at?
Basically in all the things. I mean, I was always the kid that was like, this is how we're going to play dolls. This is the activity we're doing. And if we don't do it my way, I will be just leaving the activity, right? And so my mom was always really focused on allowing me to become the person that was rooted in my strengths while also helping me recognize that being a bulldozer is not super effective in adult life. And I've had to learn that throughout my career over and over, if I'm really honest. And I think that's really what sort of triggered me to navigate my doctorate in business with a specialty in organizational industrial psychology, because people are beautifully messy. But that's always the tricky part of running a business, is all the people that are involved, right? And so I started teaching 15 years ago in the classroom. I did start when I was 12, if anybody's doing the math. And I thought to myself, look at all these beautiful frameworks, like the textbook is all these frameworks. And then I started a business, and then I was like, wow, I don't know very much. And that was 12 years ago with my husband's business, right? So if you look at the timeline, 15 years ago, I started teaching. 12 years ago, I launched my husband's business with him. And then I learned all the things that I didn't know yet about business, right? And I realized how quickly the textbooks are teaching us beautiful frameworks. And then people get involved. And rut-row. It gets messy really fast, right? And the framework doesn't work because you don't have the right kind of human capital, or it doesn't work because you don't have the right capital, or it doesn't work because your economic conditions are completely different, or it doesn't work because your cultural norms are completely different. And people make it messy. And so in my classrooms today, I'm constantly focusing on, this is a framework. Your education experience is simply to teach you the questions to ask and never the answers, right? You are going to have to learn to pivot as a leader over and over and over. And you'll have all these great ideas, and then you'll go, well, that doesn't work at all, right? And so I have really enjoyed the journey of becoming a business owner twice now, right? My husband's business is thriving. Shattered Glass Leadership is into its third year. But all of it feeds the future leaders and business leaders of our wonderful community here, and then outwards from there as well, because not all my students stay in the Salem area. But it's really important that we recognize the difference between framework and application.
You mentioned two parents at home. keeping you guided on a track, but your ambition. As you saw, where did the entrepreneurial spirit come in? So you mentioned you've started 2 businesses. Was that seen in the family? Was that encouraged? Where did that spawn from?
Yeah, both my parents, in one way or another, have been really independent in their businesses. I talk a lot about personalities. I have my own personality assessment. I've worked through it with Salem Emerging Leaders at a really small group session, and I really love to help people like apply it. So how does it look in real life, right? Not here's 27 pages about you, because that doesn't help us very much. What we need to do is look at the lens around us. But my mom had her own business and counseling practice, so she was really fast to go, oh, so those are your strengths, but guess what? Here's your weaknesses. Might want to mitigate those or else. And my dad was in sales his whole life. And so I think part of being a geriatric millennial, don't love the term, but we're really pretty committed to autonomy, right? That really spawned with the millennials. For sure. We saw a big boom in demand for flexibility and freedom and autonomy. So part of it was my parents, part of it was my upbringing, part of it's my personality. I really crave independence. I really crave doing things my way. In fact, that is why I went into the military, because I was like, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'll do it my way. So that didn't work out. That's not what the military looks like, just in case anybody out there is wondering. And then the generational cohort stuff came into play as well. And so starting the businesses was such a cool experience in that it was a lot of, okay, we're going to fail on our own or we're going to fly on our own. But ultimately, some of that also came down to a really supportive partner, and a partner that just was like happy to live in the gray area and happy to take a risk, right? And I think that's really important in a family setting to consider. Starting a business absolutely impacts the entire family, and we do need to think about that.
Yeah, there is a common misunderstanding if you're not in business, that it looks very free form, all the flexibility. I would suggest that entrepreneurs are the greatest risk takers, because you're not halfway in. Your home's finances are on the line, the wellness, both mentally, physically, the family element. If things aren't going well in business, and it is your business and you own it, that can have major effects. So high risk, high reward sometimes. And for me, I just think there's no more noble cause in our society than people taking on challenges, being solution focused, and taking that risk as entrepreneurs. Talk to me a little bit about your experience in the Navy.
Yeah, so I studied nuclear engineering. I was what they call a nuke. So, I went in right out of high school. I actually got a pretty severe injury early in my experience, and then sort of shifted gears right after my training and served in a JAG office for the remainder of my time doing kind of paralegal work. And so that was really, I joined right before 9/11. And so 9/11 was a really big impact in my life. Definitely a big, giant milestone, because it looked different than all of my peers were seeing.
When you were you active duty when 9/11 occurred?
I was.
Okay, this will be fascinating for our listeners. What was the military's response to their employees once this happened? We see the outside. From a media perspective, from the family side of imagine the loss of life, the infrastructure challenge for the United States, that vulnerability. What did the military say internally to their own people who have already stood up on their own volition and say, I stand to protect this country? Yeah. What was that messaging like?
Even today, it feels really surreal that it was even something that really happened in my life. I was on a base in South Carolina at the time that required top secret security clearances. And really, the morning going into the building looked like a college campus. It was mostly a learning facility. We were learning a lot of really important stuff. I could tell you all the reasons why K-19, that movie K-19, would never happen in our Navy, but I can't because then I'd have to kill you. So then 4 hours later, we came out of the building for like muster and lunch, and there was Marines all over the base protecting and ready to serve. It no longer looked or felt like a college campus. And everything locked down. In fact, even cell phone service locked down for the next 48 hours. And I remember when my phone came back on, I had probably 27 or 30 voicemails from my parents because everything shifted. I mean, we'd gone from being relatively peaceful for a period of time to, oh my God, are we going to war, right? And I certainly didn't join the military thinking that that was part of the story. And as a nuke, I was going to be in the bottom of an aircraft carrier running the nuclear propulsion systems. And so it wasn't really something that I thought. I was doing it for college money so that I could get through college as the oldest of 5 kids in a way that didn't put me in a ton of debt. Right. I had again, and I really wanted to do it my way. I really wanted to not do it based on somebody else's rules. And so it just was a really big culture shift in that space. I still had a lot of months of training left. A lot happened over that next year in terms of starting to prepare. And as I mentioned before, I moved into a paralegal office at one point in time. And so then I was preparing a lot of wills and powers of attorneys for a lot of men and women deploying in a very short period of time to go defend our country, like really, really defend our country.
Talk to me about what happened when you exited the military and started to embark on your collegiate career in earnest.
Yeah, I really jumped right back into going into my degree plan. I got my business degree with a minor in finance. I moved to Arizona shortly after I finished my degree out at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. Spent a few years in Arizona, and I remember getting into my first grown-up job, right? But my family's from the Pacific Northwest, and thinking, wait, 2 weeks is not enough time to take vacation and see my family. What am I going to do? And I was a little bit bored because I've always juggled so many things at the same time. Even today, I juggle a full-time professorship and Shattered Glass Leadership. And so I jumped right into my MBA. I finished my MBA in about 10 months and then moved back to the Pacific Northwest. It was so wonderful to get back here. There's no place like it. I love our home. I love our home. I settled up in Hillsboro, moved to Salem about 7 years ago. That was about the time I was finishing my doctorate as well. I had sort of accidentally fallen into higher education and was teaching in the evenings while working a day job, again, doubling down, right? And there was a good period of time where I thought, I'm definitely never going back to school, ever. And sure enough, having fallen into higher ed and fallen in love with teaching, those moments of ahas, those changes. You talk about entrepreneurialism as, that risk and that changing communities. I've always thought of it as education and entrepreneurship as the 2 E's that change the trajectories of families and communities entirely, right? And so to be part of both of those is really magic to me. So I did start my doctorate in 2013, 1 month after opening my husband's business. And so we continued to grow our family at that point in time. We had a little boy. He came with 2 boys, so I've got a house full of boys. And then then we ended up here. And I thought, someday I'm going to work at Corban. Someday I'm going to be a professor there. And it's all come together. I was at Chemeketa for several years. Wonderful family over there. Wonderful organization. So I don't know. Salem, I think, is our forever home, but I can't say that for certain.
Well, we hope it is. And we'll talk about our love for Salem in closing. I like to kind of wrap up with why we really call this place a place we choose. Corban just went through a big leadership change, and Dr. Nord served on our board of directors here, incredibly supportive of the small business engine, and very, very positive first meeting and look forward to welcoming Dr. Yates to our community. We had shared a couple of thoughts prior to recording on a little bit of his leadership style and what this moment in time means as you see it. Would you share with the guests listening a little bit about what you see with Dr. Yates and what's occurring at the university?
Yeah, so I'm so excited about the future of the university. For a little bit more context, I started teaching as an adjunct in Corban's online program 6 years ago. So I spent 4 years as just an online adjunct, which if anybody out there is kind of familiar with the adjunct community, you're sort of disconnected, but still also sort of connected, right? So I got to see what was happening. Corban is like 2 minutes from my house, which is lovely. It's a lovely commute. And so 2 years ago, I was brought on to remodel their business and psychology online program. So I finished redesigning those and then was able to move into the full-time faculty position right at the same time Dr. Yates was coming on board, right? And so I definitely have gotten to get more involved in the campus feel and the campus community. So I don't have much history with anybody leading up to this point in time in terms of, you know, what they were doing with culture and stuff. But what I will say about Dr. Yates and what I am so encouraged by as a leader, he's got that secret sauce of really balanced between heart and logic. At least that's been my impression. And I think that that's really powerful in today's organizations. What I see in organizations a lot, what I see in leaders a lot, is most of us sort of tend in one direction or the other. And the analytical logic side tends to make decisions too quickly, especially if we're tired or worn out. And I don't know if you heard, but we had a pandemic, and that left a lot of people very tired. It really left the entire world feeling pretty run down. And I think that we haven't really taken any time to recover from that. Or we spend a lot of time on the heart side, and we spend a lot of time collaborating, and then we never get to a decision. And if we don't get to a decision, we don't get to measure the change, right? We don't get to say, here was a before and here was an after, and this was what did and didn't work. What I see in Dr. Yates is the magic balance between those two. And he's so warm and welcoming.
It's a tough balance. And as leaders, we get the opportunity to work with organizations, but there is strategic decisions that have to occur. We are in a fascinating time from my perspective of we are so focused on inclusion and everybody having a voice that it has created everything takes a longer amount of time, because the reality is it's incredibly challenging to draw large groups of people together, number one, in person. Now, technology benefits us, but
it's not the same.
There is no replacement to in-person conversations, face-to-face, body mannerisms, tone. Even on Zoom, you're still having a visual product. You're hearing, but it's a visual product. It's not a atmosphere product. From your perspective, is this going to get even more are leadership decisions going to be more dragged out, or is there a way that we're going to come to kind of some common sense ways that we bring all voices to the table, but we can still be effective in decision making?
Yeah, so buckle up, Buttercup, because things are about to get bumpy, is what I'm telling leaders right now. I really think the future of the workforce, and we're in the middle of a revolution. It is a time of significant change, and businesses across the globe are going to be feeling it. Turnover, retention, we're talking about it a lot, and then nobody wants to spend the dollars on the things that fix it because it's hard to see the return on investment quickly. But I think the future is going to look hybrid. I think it's going to look hybrid so that we get a little bit of the best of both worlds. I think organizations are going to say, you need to be within an hour, right? And the beauty of continuing to promote remote work is that tax dollars start to spread into more rural zones. And when tax dollars spread into more rural zones, schools get more resources. And when schools get more resources, our kids have more opportunities. And when kids have more opportunities, you can see the dominoes start to fall, right? And then all of a sudden, our next leaders are these kids that came from rural communities because they had access to certain things. So it's actually critical that our dollars spread. If you've been paying attention to the housing market, like, whew, things are bumpy there too, right? I do a lot of research in generational cohort stuff, right? And what we're seeing with Gen Z, and the biggest summary that I can say, and I can put it out there, and your listeners will probably go, oh dear, right? They're saying, I'm not gonna work that hard to be that poor. Right? They're priced out of a ton of stuff. They have to go out more rural to get into their first homes, to get access to certain things. But nobody wants an hour and a half commute both directions. That's ridiculous. That's a tremendous waste of time. It's bad for the environment. It's terrible. It's just terrible all the way around. So how do we get to the place where we say, all right, on the third Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of the month, everybody needs to be in the office? Right? For those organic conversations, for the body language, for the culture building. Organizations are talking about, we've lost some of the culture as everybody went remote. And I don't want, they don't want to come back, but the culture of the organization is sort of disintegrating. And culture is a competitive advantage.
Yeah, let's get your take on this. So I have some things that I observe, and I'll let you verify or dispel. There is a major, I fully agree with you. We are at a paradigm shift in labor. One of the things that I consider and I think about is, first of all, I look in the mirror. I grew up where my father and my mother had one career from the time they graduated, and they were both in education and academics. But I had a grandfather who was an entrepreneur downtown Salem. He had a few careers, but by and large, the previous generation stars, you looked at career jumping as a negative. So you wanted to get some seniority and work your way up in companies, and then it kind of defined you. This is the banker, this is the lawyer, and you start creating these professions. So I have a thought, and what I tend to be seeing is our younger generations are not feeling that pressure. In fact, we speak so much about opportunity, and then we wonder and we ponder and we grit our teeth when we're losing great employees. But in reality, to them, part of their work experience is to get 10 different environments to assess where they really want to be. Now, the businesses bear the pain of that type of turnover, but for that generation, it's incredibly normal. Then you add in gig work, you add in flexibility and wanting to travel and see that. So it is a really unique dynamic. How do you, when you're consulting and working with these companies who are investing in your talents, how do you talk to them about how do you build culture, understanding the true dynamic that turn has to be part of your mindset? I have to do it here at the chamber, and we're not a large staff at all, but I am always realizing if I've done my job successfully, Kristine, I hope my employees are being plucked everywhere.
Yep.
Now, it's incredibly challenging for me. It's
a bummer.
It's a bummer. Great word for it. It's a financial bummer too.
It's a bummer all around.
Bummer all the way around. How do you work with them, and what do you consult them on to build culture, but understand the realities of the workplace?
Yeah, oh my gosh, there's so many different ways that I could just jump into this, a million different directions. Okay, so first and foremost, that whole career concept, I think it's really important that your listeners understand today's generations, both late millennials and Gen Zs, and Alpha Gen's gonna come screaming in hot real soon. They're estimated to have 5 to 6 careers during their lifetime. That's not jobs, that's careers. So they're going to have 6 different paths because they like that exploration. They like the idea of becoming a jack of all trades and jumping across different things. So yeah, get used to it. Get used to the jumping ship. It's not jumping ship anymore, it's expected. what I am encouraging businesses to do is to get agile. And back to our earlier conversation, the idea that leadership decisions are taking longer and strategic decisions are taking longer because everything is so inefficient and we have to get everybody agreeing. Those employees are going to jump ship even faster if we don't make decisions more quickly.
I agree. You're spot on. So how do we redirect? I don't think it's a redirection. How do we speak to that employee group who already are seeing truculence with pace? How do you talk to them?
Yeah, so, I spend a lot of time talking to them at the student level. I would say that the majority of my clients are not that group that's sort of establishing in their careers. They're mostly established. But I'm telling businesses to get better at their systems, get better at documentation, get better at knowing that if Susie leaves on Tuesday, and she might, you know which parts of her job are critical, right? And what they look like and what she's doing, and document them, right? Document. I like to go into businesses and have employees go, okay, write down your top 10 responsibilities that you think are your most important. Where's the manual for each of those, right? Where is the process that you use? It takes like 5 seconds to write down and take a snippet of the screen you're using and highlight. Like, it's so easy, and yet nobody's doing it because we also have created this culture of, and I think some of this is post-COVID, of like, I have to hoard my information to protect myself, right? And so leaders need to do a better job at communicating their care for employees and that they want to develop them and they want to see them leave the nest at some point in time. Because to your point, if you've done a really good job in your role, your employees will get plucked, but then you'll have a lineup of the next round. Right? And they'll want to be with you because you care to develop them to launch them out of the next nest. If you're not paying attention to those things, if you're ignoring those things, if you're saying, I don't want to train Susie because then she might leave, she's going to leave anyway. Like she's absolutely going to leave anyway if you're not offering her personal and professional development. And I want to be really clear that it's both, right? It's a rising tide situation. All ships rise with the tide, right? But millennials, Gen Zs, Alpha Gen, they're all going to be demanding opportunities for personal betterment. We're all at this like, I got to get to the top of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy, right? I got to be self-actualized. I've got to get there. And so they're all on this major journey of like, who am I? Who am I going to become? And it's not just professionally. It's all of it. It's this whole person. And I do think we have created this environment where like work is supposed to be at work, and I think that's an old way of looking at it. It's no longer relevant. It's no longer practical. I'm constantly teaching leaders how to care for people based on where they are, right? Not who you want them to be. Learning to do management by objectives, learning to document processes, and do that in a way that people still feel safe. That their job isn't in question because you're asking them to document their most important processes, right? If you're a really exceptional leader, your people will know you're asking them to document those things because if something terrible happens in their family and they need to miss 3 weeks of work, you've got it, right? I've got it. I've got you. Go. Don't do this. Now, when I think about those stories, I think back to a point in time in my career. I was adjuncting online, and it wasn't with any institutions here. It was quite some time ago in a college that doesn't exist anymore. And I called my boss, and I was like, "Hey, I am going to the hospital right now. I am going to have a baby today. Something's gone wrong, and I can't stay pregnant anymore." And he was like, "Great. Are you going to get your grades in?" And I was like, so little
moment of disconnect with your employer.
I was like, no, I'm not sure if you heard me. My doctors are concerned that like I'm getting ready to have a medical emergency. And he was like, so when will you have your grades in? So the importance of that documentation and the importance of being a leader that truly cares about your people is not so you micromanage their processes. It's not even so you don't update those processes, right? Because Sally gets replaced by Joe. Joe might find a way more efficient way to do it. Okay, document it so that The next person can figure out a new way to do it. But a great boss is going to go, oh, Sally, go, right? Like, you got things to take care of. We've got you, right? Because they need to be able to shut work out. And I think with remote work and the ability for all of it to be on our phone, that line is really hard sometimes. And great leaders are creating that space to say, well, that's your personal life and you have to take care of that first, because actually that's more important.
Well, it is more important. And I think most businesses are to that point, or if they're going to be relevant, they are. Talk to me about, you provided some incredible tactical thoughts on that last section. When you look tactically for your business clients, and you're evaluating the challenges they have in front of them, are businesses accurately seeing what they're going to face and coming to you with transparency, or are they inviting you in saying, we have blind spots?
I think I'm seeing more blind spots. And I really think a lot of that is like the post-COVID reset. And everybody's kind of going, I don't know what's happening right now, right? We're really trying to find our footing again post-COVID. And I talk a lot about basement brain and penthouse brain in a lot of the workshops that I do. And basement brain is really, operating in those survival mechanisms where we're very tired. And I help business leaders see, the different personalities and how you can recognize when they're operating just a little bit close to survival mode, because that's the time to intervene, not when we're like falling apart at the seams, right? We intervene before that. And so I really am working with a lot of leaders on the squishy stuff that's harder, less tangible. I certainly do some of the conversations around get really intentional around mission, vision, values, and then goal setting, right? And then help your people set goals that align to all of those things, whether it's personal or professional. Get intentional about that. And I think we've just sort of stopped doing that with COVID. We just all sort of went into this method of like, we just have to get to tomorrow. And so getting back to some of that, but all of that is also really hard if we're not seeing each other, and also knowing that we haven't had any in-person conversations, or we haven't really connected as human beings for a really long time. And so it all feels sort of impersonal. And so getting back to that team building space of who is your team? Like, what has happened to them over the last 4 years? You've probably seen changes in your team during all of that hoopla, right? You had a lot going on. So get back to the basics first and then start getting intentional, because I really do think that leaders' job is, when you're doing it effectively, your job is to remove obstacles from your team, right? They set the goals, they set the timelines. Those goals and timelines should align to your mission, vision, and values. If they don't, that's a different conversation. And then my job as a leader is to simply help remove obstacles. When I'm checking in with you, I'm saying, are you running up into any roadblocks right now, right? How do I support you with those roadblocks? How do I make a call so that I can get that hurdle out of the way? It's not the management that we used to see of, here's your checklist, do your checklist, and then report back to me. There's a collaboration that should exist in that relationship in most of our work, because we're knowledge workers now. We're not laborers.
You seem like somebody that mindset might be a key word that comes into play. I'm a big mindset individual, and talk to me about mindset and how you coach a positive mindset or an aspirational mindset. How do you, when you talk to people about how they, for me, I start, every day starts with making the bed. And that's so simple. That's a military side of things you can appreciate. But what it does is it says, the world I have started, number one, I'm not getting back in because I'm making this now. So this isn't, I'm going to go slip in for a nap in an hour. I'm making this now and I'm starting my day. I'm organizing the first thing I can in the day. When you coach mindset, what are some of the things that you bring to the table that would make one of our listeners go, God, I really got to connect with this individual, Dr. K. She's really hitting on some stuff.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things I talk about when I talk about growth mindset is it's not rainbows and kittens. It's not about looking at everything with a perfect output and it's all going to be perfect, right? It's about saying I have capacity to control some of the outcome. Now, a lot of people do a lot of work in the space of growth mindset and money mindset and all the mindset spaces. One of the things that I really ask leaders to get really intentional about, because I think a lot of us fall into this trap of like, I'm successful and I've done this thing and I of course I have a growth mindset. Do you? Do you? Right? Because more than likely you have areas where you have a growth mindset and areas that you don't. And those areas that you don't, as leaders, we have to dig into and we have to calibrate those things on a regular basis. I do a little bit of work with Outward Leadership. I love Arbinger Institute. I love the content of Outward Leadership. And more of us than maybe are willing to admit fall into those traps of going inward, right? And so, okay, maybe you have a growth mindset for yourself, but do you give anybody else the benefit of the doubt? Right? Do you give anybody else the opportunity to say, I can grow, I am capable? Or do you micromanage that? Do you tell them how to set the goals, right? And now we're right back into the space of your job is to set the what and the why, and it's their job to set the how. Then you have to get out of the way and let them figure out the how. Let them stumble a little bit. Failure builds a ton of character. Failure builds a ton of resilience. The other thing I talk about through the Leading in Crisis workshop is really like when we go through basement brain, like there's no talking somebody out of basement brain, right? When we're in survival mode, everything feels catastrophic. We've lost perspective. We don't have the capacity to be really logical. Like literally the survival part of our brain is disconnected from the logic center of our brain, right? And so as a leader, it's really powerful to know A, before your people are getting there, but B, if your team is navigating overwhelm on a regular basis, what are those cute, tiny things that you can say to do? Like, can I send somebody on a walk? Can I send them home early with a Starbucks card or Cold Stone? To just like stop, right? Just stop and breathe. Just stop and be in it for a second. It's about the tiny wins, right? I got dressed today. I put on adult pants. Yay me. Right? It's about the tiny wins when we're going from basement brain to first floor. But first floor all the way up to penthouse is about actual goal setting and achieving those goals. And now, whether you are on the elevator yourself or you are a leader watching your team on your elevator trying to get to and from penthouse, your job is assessing those goals and saying, how do I move obstacles out of the way? That's it, right? If I'm a great leader, I am helping people remove obstacles to be their very best self.
Oh, that is excellent content. I want to switch gears to a title. Shattered Glass Leadership. I know you do a lot of work in developing women in business and industry. I think I could take a stab at what Shattered Glass represents to you, but I'd like you to share with our listeners, what does the title of your business mean to you personally, and what should it mean to them?
Yeah, so when Shattered Glass was born, I really saw a need for women to come together in the community, be validated, and have space to calibrate as leaders. We are navigating some different challenges and obstacles than our male peers. That just is what it is. We can see the research. And women, from a gender roles perspective, our roles in the workplace and our roles in our families have changed a lot in the last 40 years. And in a lot of ways, our partners are still catching up, right? I joke in my Leading in Crisis workshop about how my husband will say something ridiculous like, how can I help you today? And I think, how does he not know? But it's not meant to be a dig at him, but generationally, his parents, somebody was supporting the home and somebody was supporting the work. And so he kind of watches and he goes, She looks like she needs help, but I don't know how, right? But we have morphed a lot. We are crashing glass ceilings. There's where the shattered glass comes from. But it's not just women, it's minorities across all different walks of life. And so we are reshaping the workforce, but we have reshaped much more quickly than the workforce has reshaped. And so we're trying really hard to balance all the things, right? And keep all the balls in the air. And the reality is, post-COVID, women are really tired. Women especially that have navigated either aging parents or kids at home during the pandemic, there's a real need for that stop and calibrate and step back for a second. We get so busy nurturing and caring for all the people around us and making sure that all the things are done and all the stuff is taken care of. It can be years in between our popping our head above the clouds and checking the horizon and going, oh my gosh, I'm off track, right? I don't even know who I am anymore. And so the Unlock Your Influence Women's Leadership Retreat is really a space for women to come together and recalibrate on our purpose and who we are as leaders, who we are as moms, who we are as sisters and daughters and sometimes grandmas, right? I've had women of all ages come through the Unlock Your Influence Retreat, and the content meets you where you're at. I'm going to be really honest. My mom journey as a leader has been harder than any employment corporate journey as a leader, because that target moves. Their brains aren't cooked yet, and they are not done developing. So it changes. Every time you think you've got it figured out, you're like, oh no, right? And I'm right back into outward leadership and going, oh, give them the benefit of the doubt. Oh, am I inward? And am I giving them the opportunity to say, oh, I can do this? Or am I assuming bad intent, right? I don't know if you have teenagers in your life. They're hard.
Kids in general are hard.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have my own. I have two wonderful nephews who it's an awful lot of pleasure at the end of a day or two to be able to drop them off. So this leadership conference, the Unlock Your Influence, who is your perfect attendee? And if it's not a perfect attendee, who would you ideally like to invite?
Yeah.
And who pulls the most value from this?
Yeah, so I think it falls into 3 buckets. I think the emerging leader that is sort of new to leadership at any age, right? Some of us get into our first formal leadership role as 35-year-olds. Some of us as 40-year-olds. So that emerging leader, that first time of I've navigated my career really successfully, but now I have a team. All those things, right? I think that's a really great candidate for coming in to calibrate their leadership skills. Make sure that I am not assuming the lens that I should be looking through, right? We often navigate our own communication language really effectively, and then we forget about all the rest of them. I would say the leader that's navigated a lot of shifting in the last couple of years, or the leader that's got a brand new team. So those are the kind of the 3 ideal candidates that I think benefit the most. Now, I love serving nonprofits in our community. And so I offer pretty steep discounts to nonprofits that want to send their people, because I also think that sometimes the smaller organizations and the solopreneurs and the 4-man teams, it's hard to come up with those funds for those things or carve out that time or that money. And so I just have a heart for those organizations. Well,
I'm glad you do. And here's why. As a leader who's running a nonprofit, we are consistently looking at how do we provide because our customers are investors, whether it's Family Building Blocks, YMCA, United Way, Boys and Girls Club. If you're giving money to an organization, you're investing in that organization, and you're probably investing in an outcome you feel is important based on your personal value system, or if you're a business making the donation, the value system of your employees and what your organization stands for. When you're assessing with each spend, like we do here, whether it is providing a member benefit back, we sometimes get lost in that fold of we still need to do career development for our employees. We still need to be inspiring and providing pathways. So I commend you for targeting the nonprofit space. And I'd also argue there's incredible leaders coming out of the nonprofit space that may end up being your for-profit leaders in the end, who are, digging their heels in a little bit on the nonprofit side and understanding the totality of what makes up a community. As this event, as it occurs, this conference, the Unlock Your Influence, it occurs each summer, correct?
Yeah.
And as you look back, how many events have you had so far?
11.
11 events. The next event will occur this coming in 2024, correct?
Yeah, we have one in May, and we have a 3-day in May and a 2-day in August.
Where do these occur?
They happen right here in Salem. And they're small. They're intimate experiences because we're learning from each other the entire time. And again, that community piece is really important. It's actually one of my pet peeves when people go, I just got back from a leadership retreat. And I'm like, how many people? And they go, 300. That was a conference. This is a retreat. This is a space to come together, and we're learning together. So I cap off registrations at 20 people. And so it's a really powerful time of applied knowledge, taking the content and practicing it together, setting real goals, getting calibrated on who I am as a leader, and reflecting on what my team's gonna need from me, whether it's my family team or my work team or my student team. And I learned something every time. I wrote the content, and I learned something every time. And I've had women from their early 20s to their late 60s, and the content meets you where you're at.
Lifetime learners, yes. All of us. Tell me what recharges you. So you're in the business of, you bring incredible energy. People love to be around you. I can attest to that. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I have team members who were giggling all day today that you were coming in. Talk to me about how because you've got to be on point. You're working with groups that are coming to you to help solve dynamic issues, maybe even see issues for the first time in a gentle way where you coach. Talk to me about how you personally recharge yourself, because you got to be the first asset that's ready to roll. Yeah.
So my husband is, he's my rock, and he makes me laugh. And the laughter and the time just being around him just recharges my battery, because he just makes me laugh. And I guess that's probably my version of romance, I guess. And so there's a lot of laughter there. But my husband and I also, we sneak away at least once a year, and we scuba dive. We scuba dive kind of all over. We've got some of our favorite spots, but we dive with sharks. We snorkel with whale sharks. We dive. We go find something tropical. And in between diving, I read so much. And it's not, everybody's like, oh, what author were you reading? And I'm like, most of the time it's something with vampires. I'm going to be really honest. I really, really love my mind candy when I'm on vacation. I'm like, no, I don't do personal development there, because I'm always doing the heavy lift in the classroom. I'm writing the uncourses. I'm getting my students paired up with, my seniors at Corban pair up with local businesses. That's a heavy lift for me as well, not just finding the businesses, but coaching the students through things like how to send an email and how to follow up. And when you get an email from a business with 3 time opportunities, you can't just reply that morning that today works. Like, businesses don't leave their calendars open for you, right? So I'm like, that's a heavy lift all year round with all of my students. And so when I'm on vacation and I'm diving, I'm reading something with vampires. I'm gonna be really honest, or werewolves. Don't judge.
We're not judging. Long as they're pro-business, pro-small business vampires, we're in great shape. They are,
I'm sure of it.
I'm going to read you a statement because there's a word in here that really grabbed me. Dr. Medyanik champions local women-owned small businesses by incorporating their products into coffees, treats, and delightful surprises in her in-person workshops and retreats. But listen to this. With her dynamic speaking style and insightful content, Dr. Medyanik captivates audiences worldwide. Tell me a little bit about what it is like to be teaching or working with people outside of your direct Salem, greater Salem area. Worldwide's that's a big, bold statement.
Yeah, it is. When I talk about leadership, I talk about a target a lot. And the center of that target is personalities. The second ring is experience, right? And those experiences lead to our beliefs. The beliefs lead to actions, and the actions lead to results. And
you still have to take the course, listeners. You still have to take the course.
You've only gotten a few nuggets here. I promise you'd get more. That experience ring, the more time that I spend around people with different cultures, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic upbringings, the more I get to honor that difference, right? That the more I get to understand that, it's impossible to understand all the things that could have impacted all the people, right? I have my story. I have what I understand, and I have the stories of those that I love or respect from my whole lifetime, which is really pretty short in the grand scheme of things, right? We're here for a finite amount of time. So to be able to inspire somebody outside of our little ring, it's such an honor, but I get to take that honor and then really reapply it to help other people change their belief systems so that they can change their actions and change their results, right? And that really is where mindset comes in, right? If I change my beliefs, I get to change my outcomes because I'm doing something different.
You mentioned a word that, and hit on it a little bit, but I want to dig deeper into it. And it's probably odd that this would be one of our closing topics, but you're incredibly secure in this space. Failure. So fail forward. There's lots of cliches, but I find a certain, in one of the worlds I work in is collegiate and high school officiating. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. And I know that's a strange statement, but failure is part of our maturation. Failure is part of how we learn. We take self-responsibility. We look at changes we may have wanted to deploy. So failure is a great teaching tool. How do you coach your clients through failure when it's so deep and personal, and maybe it's catastrophic, but maybe it's not quite as bad as what they envision it is?
Yeah, as you're talking through that, I really start thinking about the research around millennials and the research around like the trophy generation. And when I started digging into that research, there really was heavy emphasis on like, don't be a helicopter parent, make sure your kids learn to get back up, right? And so I'm just constantly teaching my students specifically now, like, this doesn't define you. None of this defines you, right? Your character is still being developed. Who you are going to become is still part of the journey. And I talk to them all the time about education as a journey of progress and not perfection. And I think generationally, we've really created a bit of a hiccup there that, Gen Z, what they're seeing in the research right now is they're so fearful of failing that they're frozen. They're failing to take a step forward because they might fail. And so the coaching, the talking through that is like, okay, so what? Then what, right? What happens then, right? With my students, I'm like, okay, so what happens if you fail a 10-point quiz? It's just what happens? Well, nothing? Nothing happens, right? Like, okay, then we learn from it. We learn to do it a little bit better next time. You may or may not know this, but I teach at Oregon State Corrections Institute. I teach leadership to a group of men at the prison through Corban's program, and talk about people that are learning through failure, right? And so if they can move forward, if they can find an opportunity to move forward in some of the most horrific circumstances that in a lot of ways they created, then the rest of us shouldn't have too much of a problem.
For those who, I have a take on failure. A lot of people want to see people fail. It's like this clickbait. You want to
Oh, yeah, we are hungry for watching other people fail.
We're hungry to watch other people fail, but I would also remind people, do you know what our favorite thing to actually watch? People returning from failure. There is something that emotionally grabs us, that if a person has had a moment in their life that seems like an incredible low, and then yet can transform themselves and come back triumphantly, it creates this like really weird, we pull for them. And so for everyone that feels like people are watching you fail, there's something there. But boy, if you do, there's more people wanting to watch you rebound and succeed. As they say, that nothing America likes more than a comeback.
Yeah, the underdog.
The underdog story. All right. I love wrapping up with pride in choosing Salem. And we're both two people, could live anywhere we want, probably do a lot of different things if we so chose. Why do you proudly call Salem home?
Well, I have created my own tiny piece of paradise in South Salem, and I love the trees, I love the green, I love the community feel. I think when I moved here, one of the things that really stuck with me really quickly was it feels like a small town with big city amenities and access to resources. And so being able to raise my kids in a space where, somebody's going to call you if they do something boneheaded, is pretty awesome, but they also have access to all the things. I grew up in a really small town out in Eastern Washington, and that jokes was always like, well, there's only two things to do on the weekends, and I'm really grateful that my kids have so many different kinds of opportunities. I work really hard to support as many small businesses in our community as I can, whether it's through guitar lessons or the stickers that I put on my mugs, or the, just the treats and the cupcakes that I bring into workshops. I think that it's really important to continue to support our local economy, and that's continued to be a really important value of mine.
We appreciate that perspective, and it's incredibly healthy. Dr. Kristine Medyanik is pulling for Salem, and she's pulling for your business success, and could be an asset to you. And you can check out more information about her company at shatteredglassleaders.com, and also on all the social channels in a combination between Shattered Glass Leaders and Shattered Glass Leadership. I want to thank you for this. You've energized me. I'm ready to go conquer the world. I know our listeners are probably very enthused right now. And Dr. K, your perspective is spot on, and it's really healthy for our community. I thank you for investing here and for sharing your wisdom with so many people who are yearning for this content right now. Really appreciate your time today.
It was wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Salem Chamber podcast. The Salem Chamber is a 501c6, not-for-profit organization representing nearly 1,100 businesses in the greater Salem area. For additional information, please visit salemchamber.org. This has been a production of Dan Johnson and Lena Prine on the Salem Chamber's professional staff team.